All right, so Fred invited me to talk a little bit about my experience at the University Games earlier this year or last season as a competition control. Thank you. And for me, it was a great experience. It's a highest level kind of event I've attended, and it's a little stressful, but there's a lot of TDs here that made life a lot easier. Working together. So I appreciate that. It was a really great experience and being part of the games and an international high-level jury and so forth. So that was a mascot around the match. Came to visit once in a while. Competition control, as defined by the ICR, is the chief of control in competition security, responsible to organize together with the jury the suitable placing of controllers to collect pertinent information and to report any incidents to the jury. Two controllers per post without notifying competitors, coaches, and other officials. Record violations and may use video equipment, and after the competition inform the chief of control of any violations and be ready to testify with the jury or in a hearing. I'm not really sure what competition security all stands for. I think there could be bigger events, accreditation, and even...
you had enough security in that Lake Placid.
Yeah, but that's, usually in Lake Placid was a whole different, department, so to speak. What we did, we had controllers observing potential technique obstructions and technique violations, obstructions, and other violations, and then we had marshals to enforce the course access and direct competitors and coaches and backsticks to warm up and wax testing areas, and then spectator control within the field of play. So Mount Van Hoevenberg, the layout, lucky with all the money that was spent the last few years, and it was designed for World Cups and so forth. So the stadium is all new, trails and snowmaking over 5K. It was designed with the TV and timing in mind. And I, a little cluttered, this map, but all these yellow are pods where there's timing and TV access. So there's around that 5K course, there's a lot of those boxes where fiber is pre-wired. And the black circled ones are control points. We had a couple of extra as well. The control was an afterthought, but I think Alan came up with the idea that, initially when we're talking in the spring, was to, we're going to have traditional with iPhones and WhatsApp and send messages, and then I think Alan came up with the idea we could just plug in security cameras into those pedestals that the TV and timing can access. So working with ORDA, Al and I identified a number of different locations where we wanted to be, and then with ORDA we had cameras, security cameras, and those security cameras were just plugged into that LAN network and worked off of their security system. Some of the locations, after the fact, kind of were a little bit challenging, like this one, because this was an important uphill, the last uphill, and we were too far away and we couldn't cross down, the downhill. So that one didn't work out very well. But so maybe make some changes going forward. But there's some learning there. But otherwise, it worked out very well. The other thing is inside the jury room, we had multiple laptops and a big screen TV, which was following the network with the broadcast. And then, as a chief of control, sat in the jury room and watching multiple cameras could follow, split screens could follow the race. And then we had controllers stationed by the cameras, but they didn't need to record anything on iPhone or an iPad. They had radios and would call in to the chief of control of the jury room when they had the situation. So again, we plugged all those cameras into the ORDA camera system, security camera systems, and and they were regular security cameras. On the screen, you have a great zoom in and zoom out feature. When controller calls something in, you can go back and look at it. So it was really easy. You can replay at various speeds on the computer. You can even hook up to a big screen, so to speak. And then you just download the clips and save it, and for the review by a jury. We had a number of cameras pre-mounted that left bottom picture, and then some on tripods. Most of them were on tripods. The tree mounted gave a better angle, depending on the hill and so forth, often, and they were more stable, or stability. The tripods in an angle could tilt over. It was a little bit difficult to mount them and keep them safe and secure. But they were a lot more portable. So we had a few that we could actually move around to different spots, depending on the race, and use different race courses as well. The two things that was a main challenge was the ones that you would think are no-brainers, and that was actually the radio reception in the jury room. Didn't work very well, so we had to have a person outside the jury room taking the calls and then coming into the jury room. And then the internet. I think Ed was very helpful helping us out with the internet, but it was still very slow. The system records ongoing, so you don't lose anything, and when it's good quality, but once you kind of on your laptop, for instance, and reviewing it, sometimes it could be a little choppy. So that was a bit of a challenge that we had.
Did any of those locations, did any changes happen? Like new mounts,
Not
new
yet,
locations,
no,
or
no.
wires buried to?
Yeah. I mean, I submitted afterwards a few ideas. I mean, we should have put a conduit under the Grindhouse Hill, for instance, we could move it closer, and we'll have access. I don't know if that was done yet. Unfortunately, we had, I was on the LP 2023 laptop, so all the downloads of the live video clips were on that one, and going back into the system now starts from March 31st. So I just want to show me how to play that one. Just, what you see from one of these, this is a tripod mounted camera, for instance. And this was a bit of a problem area in certain races. So it's a pretty good visibility that in terms of, and this camera is actually set back not where it would be during the competition, closer to snowback, or this is tripod mounted. Sometimes we have it further down, sometimes maybe a little further up.
So what was the problem with it? Was it not set far enough?
Which one?
This camera, was it not set far enough?
This particular one is just where it's next to the box. This is actually the box.
Yeah. Where
we move it back when it's not in it. So this wasn't erased. This was just a clip I found the other day, and it's sitting there, resting. But we have about 75, 100 feet of wiring to the tripod.
Yeah.
So some situations we actually had one there. Most of the time we had the camera kind of right up here. Most of the fractions kind of right here. But initially, when we were thinking about it, that's another thing is when we set these up, we set them up in the summer, and on the blacktop because that's a roller skate. Right. And it's much different what you see on blacktop in the summer versus what you see on the sunny, glary, in terms of the angle and the motion, and of course the snow takes away some of the incline as well, or increases.
My memory was that they were jamming up after the fence, a little farther down the course.
Yes, so there's the next camera actually. This is not play. So the same people coming through. Yeah, so this is actually control point 3. There's a camera up in the tree here. So this is tree mounted, and that corner is right there. Sometimes you have some issues, but they were jamming up down here.
Yeah, right.
And we have a camera in that tree actually that can face down that way. Yeah, so, you know, it's a 5K course with a few cutoffs and so forth. Yeah. So this is in the summer, this happened to be in the roller skate, so the disability, maybe this one's not as different, but you have a little bit different. But it's a great, you know, on a bigger screen, it's much easier to detect that than on a smaller iPhone. So, we can skip the next one. Yes, that's the same group coming back up.
Oh, I'm gonna watch it.
You want to watch it? See, when this is live, you can actually zoom in.
So
and
is
kind
that
of
the
follow them
Omega?
Closer. Yeah.
Looks funny from that angle. It
Yeah.
looks so flat.
Was that what?
Yeah, it's not much of a ski.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's much steeper than it looks.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here, so this was one issue on this, and that's why we actually put a camera on that tree as well. Here, it looks pretty flat, and it's easier to see, but when there's snow covered, you actually had a tough time seeing what's going on down there at the beginning of that hill. So that's why I put another camera on. And Orta was very accommodating, you know, with this and putting up individual different cameras and so forth. So some things to consider. You know, you want to cover multiple spots depending on the race and the course. The exchange and tag zone is difficult because you get 30 meter long, and if you only have one camera, it's hard to catch. You know, so you would have to have multiple. We had a couple of incidents that were not recorded. You know, one was a ski exchange, that impossible ski exchange, and so forth. But so we did not have a good camera, you know, set up for that zone. The lap finish split. You know, at least in like Classic, for whatever reason, that seems to be a trouble spot. But it's when you went to finish in the lap, and I think we had one of those situations at the World University Games. And then the ability to see and record bib numbers, because sometimes you put the camera and you're kind of focusing on maybe the legs, the skis, and the body more so, and then you know the bib number may be hard to catch, depending if you have an angle. And then the angles, again, on the hills and the turns, you know, may want to adjust it a little bit depending on the race as well, and are you looking to peak or obstruction depending on the race. We had some issues with interference by broadcast in the coaching zones. Like the broadcasted up camera, actually that hill we saw there was a snow gun further down, so we had to kind of get around it. So forth. So there's some of that you got to adjust, and you know we did a lot of adjustments and additional cameras set up. You know, after the jury arrived and talking to the jury where they wanted to have, you know, where they thought the trouble spots would be. So they were very good. And maybe most important was communication with the jury and the controllers. You know, I think most TVs know it's a different level of you know, how serious you take different infractions and so forth. And I was a little surprised by, you know, the jury at the World University game wasn't as strict that maybe some of us, other teachers maybe would have been.
Really?
But that, yeah, and it's kind of like, you know, I would have expected them to be a lot stricter. So I was a little like, you know, nervous about, okay, how much information do you want? What do you want? And you know, in the beginning, you start learning, you know, what you're looking for, and it was kind of okay, it makes it easier if you don't have to worry about every little fraction, so to speak, whether it's you know, something you want to report. So we had a little bit of issues with the inspection and warm-up loop or the control of it because we also had biathlon alternating with cross country, and then you know I think there was a little confusion about you know when their warm-up was and when you know and if we were running a little bit late, whether it was you know who could be out there, and you know, talking about volunteers, and these are you know the marshals are all volunteers, and if you give them wrong information and then the athletes come, you know, and they're trying to stop them, and you know it's not pleasant for the volunteers to try to do their job and you know not having the right information. So that was a little bit of a challenge.
Did you end up having more control violations because you saw more on the videos? Or
So, you know, interestingly enough, we really didn't have a lot of violations. And you know, the few that, there was a couple that I thought was that the jury didn't really.
Uh-huh.
But, and then there was a couple that were, I think, that they picked up on.
Yeah.
I think maybe it was two, I don't know. Two really, maybe at the most, but it wasn't, we didn't have a
For all that
lot
time,
of.
and all those competitors, two violations.
Yeah, I mean, there was a few that I think were.
Yeah.
There's some close.
It was like,
But I think
But-
the only-
But there's
only one.
also the situation, it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because there was potentially a pretty significant violation that was witnessed, but not recorded, so therefore it didn't,
the ski exchange.
yeah.
Yeah, so
It
that was
didn't.
because we had a camera in the finish start area, but it didn't capture the whole ski exchange, and we didn't really have the right timing, and, you know, as many.
And that particular jury didn't approach the particular potential violator saying, we don't have this on camera, but here's what we understand.
Yeah.
And have them say yay or nay, just on their own, you know.
So,
on-
yeah,
but-
I think they did talk to the coach.
they may have talked to the coach then, but there was no evidence for this, they were saying, hey, did you, and they denied it, but.
But see, so that's the norm now, like if it's not recorded, it didn't happen. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a tricky thing on monitoring races, because most organizations don't have that level of recording and monitoring.
But, the big but to that is if a jury member sees it and then they're recording, a jury member's opinion still goes.
So it was interesting, I don't know if you remember that one, the hill, the second, you know, when they come up that hill, there was one time, I forgot what race it was, but the two people in front, once they hit the top of the hill, they stopped. So they had everybody coming up in the hill, and they had to stop, uphill kind of, in motion. They didn't stop 100% the two first ones, but they really stopped enough to cause a chain reaction, and then they took off downhill.
Were they
So-
same team?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Same team.
So, is that obstruction?
That's same team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's the
Unsportsmanlike
strategy?
conduct.
Where's the strategy? My first intuition was it's kind of a little bit of obstruction, but the jury felt that was the strategy. But anyway, that was an interesting discussion. So our daily operations, talking about getting out in the 5K, we had one at the camera at the furthest most point on the 5K, so a little bit of a hike. So I also have on my cell phone, I have the app. So once in the mornings when I went out to set up the cameras, I could see the angles. I didn't have to go back in and out, so to speak. And even then, when the TVs that were the controllers went out, they had cameras. We could make some adjustments once we saw people practice. So the TVs were paired up with other experienced volunteers, and you know, really they observed and recorded if find occasion infraction and called it in via radio. And then, like I said, we had a radio receiver outside of the building, and then relayed into the chief controlling computer and myself. And I would, you know, I had two screens, and often I actually caught the same infraction. They would follow the race, or depending on what kind of race it was. And then, you know, I kept on reviewing it, and you know, did video snips and downloaded it. And we had a jury member in the room as well, watching the big screen broadcast. So, and then, you know, I would call him over and you know, we would review it.
Knut,
Yes.
I didn't hear your point about the TV pairing.
Oh, so we had TVs like yourselves, often paired with another experienced. So we had two people, but you know, a lot of times, like in that first hill, you come up. Actually, let's go to video. You could have one further down and one further up. Then you had two.
NENESA
different angles.
TVs, not the race TVs.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I never found that volunteer. I was alone the whole time.
Well,
Sure, with a TV.
that was the ideal situation, but many times we didn't have enough volunteers, so we ended up with one person. So that's
I
kind
think
of,
you're my partner.
That was-
Yeah, we were looking at different locations.
so some of the benefits, that network system is, which I love is the fact that you don't really need an iPhone and iPad. And you're not standing out there in cold weather with frozen fingers and dead batteries. And then, a lot of times what I've experienced when I'm out there doing, with an iPad or, an iPhone is you think you see something and then you're looking at a screen and then you got a lot of others. You're kind of missing the race. And also, a lot of times you're recording, but you're also watching. So sometimes you think you saw something, go back and you were in the wrong angle with the phone, for instance. So, this takes out, there's a cost to it, obviously, and so forth, but it does take out, a lot of that, say the less than, the more challenging things with having iPhones and iPads and being out there, so to speak. And potentially you got less volunteers needed, like you mentioned, sometimes you only have one person on the spot. And you have instant feedback to the jury.
So what is the protocol now going forward for Eastern Cups? Is there an expectation that the controllers are going to be out there with iPads or iPhones, or?
That depends on the venue. This happens to be the Lake Placid.
No, but I'm just saying across the Northeast, what's the?
There isn't really a set standard at this point, but generally we'll probably have people out there with some sort of tablet or phone during recordings, except in Lake Placid where they have this higher, more expensive level of technology to play with.
Yeah, this is the only place, right?
Lake Placid.
It's the only place in the U.S. that has this.
Lake Placid is the only place that has the cabling in place to do this.
Yeah,
Who laid that cable?
I'm assuming that Salt Lake City or
Solar Hall probably puts this in now.
And the good news is that other places, like events I've done at Craftsbury, being on the jury or as a volunteer, and other places, if you have somebody with an iPad, you can have anybody who is untrained just holding the iPad. So you can have the trained volunteer, whether it's a jury member or someone as a volunteer, to keep your eyes on the races and observe things. I think it opens up the possibility that you need fewer of the trained people than if you have no recording and we require two people seeing the same thing, focusing on the same thing. This way, just anybody who can run the iPad very well doesn't even need to know the sport. If they're with a trained person saying, please stand here and record them as they're coming up the hill.
And the reality is that at the Easter Cup level, we probably have 2 teams at most out doing this. So we're not talking about a lot of numbers necessarily. And we're usually on shorter leagues too. So the idea is like we're not looking for every single infraction like you would at the World Cup level. We're more just interested in like, are people generally doing things right? And especially now that all the junior boys are not trying to double pole every single classic race anymore, we have a lot less issues. So it's something that was needed a few years ago. It came along, we came up with a solution, and we have neat instances like this one, Lake Placid, where we can show it off every now and then, but it's a tool we're going to keep using, at least for the foreseeable future anyway, just to kind of keep an eye on things and really ultimately just educate our athletes and coaches. Like, this is like generally what the expected appropriate technique is for doing our sport. If we don't monitor them, then they're never going to get to learn, and then they get to another level and they get hosed. So it's on us to make sure that they have a good learning experience along the way, even if it's not always a perfect day. Chris?
Yeah, I'd like to say, it's pretty easy to get the iPads, the iPhones, and things like that now. It's almost become standard. But it's just 2 people verbally versus an athlete and a coach. It's just your word against their word, And video is amazing. I've been in situations where we call people in, and the coach and the athlete, that never happened. The 9 you show them the video, and all of a sudden the room gets very quiet, And all of a sudden the protest is dropped immediately, or whatever is done. And on the other flip side too, even if it's just a verbal warning, even if it's not even going to a verbal warning, I've taken the video to a coach and an athlete and just say, hey, this is what we saw out there. We're not going to, call it an infraction, but a learning experience. You may not have thought your turning technique was illegal, but you are doing an illegal turning technique right here, or doing a turning technique we're not supposed to. So video doesn't lie, you know, and so if you can, anytime you get video out there, get video out there.
And for those of you that are not experienced TDs and have dealt with this a lot, like this is very much on a scale, like with Built Coke athletes, U16 athletes, like it is purely a learning experience for them. And then we ramp it up slowly over time with a lot of consequences until they're a good college skier or an elite level athlete where like you follow the better rules then. But it's definitely, it's a process to get there. It's not all or nothing. So.
One thing too, you know, especially here where we all had very brightly colored jackets, you knew why I was standing there at the bottom of the turning area. And I would think the same thing with, you know, you're holding an iPad out in front of you looking at a turn or a technique zone.
So on a sprint, for instance, right, you don't need a lot of people out there because you can usually they all come together and you know you can sit and just monitor on the number of follow the race, and we've done that in other races and it's worked well. So again you need, you know, it's less potential, less volunteers needed. It can be struggle to get volunteers on that. But you know, I don't know if I hear, but I mean maybe there is, you know, technology is becoming cheaper and cheaper, and you know, Wi-Fi is obviously you want to make sure you have good connection, but maybe, you know, as Wi-Fi gets better too, that you can put up a few, you know, cameras on, you know, get power because you got light.
Yeah, we
right?
strung fiber
did.
when we pulled power from the light.
Yeah, so I mean, you kind of got that, you know.
Do you guys stream the camera in the building for spectators?
So, no, not these cameras, because these are actually tied into the security system, you know, on Bloomberg order. But they often have live TV, or I mean, obviously live TV, but, you know, they got TVs in, and then if there's a TV broadcast, they, you know.
That was regular broadcast.
The broadcast.
Yeah, and those guys they're just cutting the cable into the snow and hauling it up the hill manually. Is that what they do?
No, in Lake Placid, it's permanent. There's 12 or 24 strands of fiber to every one of those points around the course.
Yeah, okay.
So like the camera guys will just plug in.
But in other venues, aren't they doing it manually?
Venues that don't have permanent infrastructure like that, they run miles of
They
cable.
walk it up there.
Go for the roller skate.
Question for the iPads and iPhones out on course with technique control. Are you supplying like tripods so they don't have to use their hands and just keeping it going all the time? Or is it like, oh, this kid looks suspicious, I'm going to start a snap a video of that?
You could do the
On
tripod.
a multi-lap race,
Yeah.
if you see something the first time around, you do tend to target the racer
How many do I have to
second,
buy?
third, or fourth time around, and
Yeah.
often they're generous.
The TV does that trick too.
Getting to that start is pretty easy, but you're just recording when they come through. If it's interval start, of course, it's almost continuous recording, and then you need to have extra batteries in your pocket. You know.
I mean, it's easier to keep it running, but then you don't have to,
Right.
you know, keep it in cold weather, but then the cold weather, then the battery will like.
It's,
But you could do like the sprint scenario, you could put it up on a tripod, just have the person start and stop it, like say when each sprint he went by. So you just get that 30 minutes long clip.
Or it's an external battery
Yep.
and the tripod and keep it coming. We're still looking after volunteers.
Yeah, I mean, make it easy for volunteers, you know.
yeah,
And a lot of times at Eastern Cups, you have jury members that one of them gets dedicated to managing this side of things, so they're out there monitoring, and maybe there's a pair of volunteers. Tamara and then Peter?
that would fall into also that volunteer thing. I, as a volunteer, just apart from a TV, would often come with my iPad and my external battery, and that's a lot. You know, that's my personal equipment. I'm using it out in the snow. You know, I think if we're going to have that expectation that, you know, that equipment should be provided by the host or, you know, and have a standard that this is what we use, this is how we use it, rather than.
And in some cases too, like I know Craftsbury, they'll run different devices out, they'll swap them out so that
Right,
they
'cause
can get
they're
video on a regular basis back to the jury room.
I always use two people too. At the World Cup in Minnesota it's coming up, they're actually using iPads.
Really?
Really?
Are you going out there?
Well, maybe. So, but yeah, so that's what I heard.
Peter, did you
Yeah,
think I can
I have to admit that I come from the days where we used to have the racers ski the track in before the race.
Yeah.
Bearing that in mind and worrying about batteries and cables and all of that other stuff, it's still valuable to have two course controllers spot something and call them on it. And if it and have it go to the jury, and if they don't get charged with and convicted of anything, that's fine. That's that teaching opportunity. And at these lower level races, who else is set up the way Orta's set up? So most of us aren't going to run into that. And I don't think we should lose track of the value of having two course controllers calling a kid or a racer and screwing up on the course.
But that requires trained, because that's another volunteer. There are volunteers who are skiers, have been skiing
I'm just
a long
saying,
time.
if we see violations, we ought to feel comfortable
Right.
calling them on it and let the jury handle it.
Right, but there are volunteers who think they know what a violation is, and they aren't trained to know the technicalities of a violation. That's what I'm saying. So I think it's great if you have two TDs that are doing that.
Well, you don't
You don't need two TDs. There's a lot of people out there that are good reliable callers, and you listen to your audience. You know.
And we do have the TD talk to those volunteers before they head out, right?
It's still
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah.
Yes.
They can be
Yes.
wrong. It's okay if they're
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
So they're going to describe what they saw.
That's
And
right.
you're going to ask the athlete what he did. And then you have 2 or 3 people decide.
So if it's not
I've
a
seen
jury
racers
member, you
humbled
don't
by
have
being
video,
questioned.
then
There's no rule that says you have to have it.
No, but one of the things that we have now, because video is so readily available, even if we're not out there recording it, we can show them what it looks like ahead of time. Just like if you have your phone or whatever, or computer, like hey, this is a clip of some of the things you might see out there. If it's anything close to this, just let us know. We'll deal with it on the back end.
I mean, I started out before 2010. We didn't accept anybody's.
We barely had flip phones then.
I know. You didn't accept anybody's video from the audience. And I know it was the guy from Fort Collins. He said, no, I'll accept the video and look at it and decide. And,
Doug Gordon. Doug Gordon.
Yeah, Gordon. And now, I mean, I have 2 printed pictures and a video of a potential violation on my computer that I'm not going to use tomorrow, but it was submitted and it was very helpful.
Fred, not trying to make more work for you, but perhaps NENESA could come out with a video for volunteers, what an infraction is and what it isn't, and they can actually look at this before they're being tasked to be in one of those positions. They can look at the day before, they can look at it that morning while they're having their coffee or their instructions from the TV.
Here's for those that, on that sign-up sheet, I know Orta actually does have that with the explanations or some information. It does explain, you can explain that it requires some.
Yeah. You can explain it, but video is crystal clear on what
Sure.
you're looking for,
Yeah, I mean,
Well, then also the FIS site.
That was just as,
Yeah.
FAIS has modules.
yeah. What we should probably do is just extract some of those.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the YouTube video that we can
I've
just
done that.
do, because
That's a good idea.
only this TVs can get to this reservoir of videos at this point.
No, I think they have a regular, the videos, but the regular page. I mean, I
Yeah.
can tell you it's John Aldridge's lecture from 2004 because I have that original copy.
But if you have fiber out there, a few cameras, you need to have a system. I don't know, you can put up a Ring system or any of those home security systems, $10 a month and get a few cameras out there and try it. I think, as a volunteer, having done that, a lot, iPhones and iPads, and dead batteries, and delivery screens, and things like that. This is obviously luxury, but yeah, it makes it a lot easier. And just as a summary or an advance, it was an awesome experience for me, and it was a great crew of volunteers and the TDs, most of you TDs here who helped out. Really big thanks to NENESA. I really got to say it's a great organization, and the mentorship I've gotten from quite a few of these TDs here and so forth, and it's just great fun to be part of. This was the jury, Lake Placid, so Nick was national TD. Sylvia from Norway, Carol there, and then Chris from Lake Placid, not to the jury, but Sophie from Poland, and then Glenn from Canada. You got Alan back to us. Fred, our chief of course.
Don't go by that picture. We didn't drink after every race, okay?
Yeah. No, that was actually.
Right, that
was before the race. That was before the race. No, that was that the last day?
That was the last day.
So the cameras right now in Lake Placid do you take them down, or are they permanently mounted?
No, they're on the tripods.
Well,
Some are on trees.
where are they?
They're sitting in the grass right now.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
They'll take care of
I was
boys.
just out there this a couple days ago. This was snowmaking the other day. So the jury room is right here. This is actually, so from the jury room you can look down at the stadium. This is one of the cameras that's right now sitting next to that box. That's for TV timing and snowmaking.
So they're not collected and people don't steal them? Or...
You should collect them if they're not permanently mounted. Like the ones that are on the tripods out there, I would recommend between the events they probably should get brought in, and cable and stuff like that. If they're not permanently on a tree, because they do. They get knocked over into the snow, and you don't want them to be groomed over, or snow-making operations and things like that.
And the quality of those tripods were not the greatest. Some of the legs froze, and the clips broke off, and we had a little bit of issues.
Cold, especially in Lake Placid, is really hard on plastic gear that you're trying to move around. So the ones that were permanently mounted, I think, survived a lot better than the tripod ones.
All right. Any other questions?
Good job.
Thank you very much, News.